doing this? Okay, here we go. So wonderful that everybody is here. Thank you so much for joining us, Marie. And can you just say how you pronounce your last name? I was trying to practice it today, but
yes. Well, thank you for practicing. First of all, thank you for having me. It's Marie. The last name is Hurabiell.
Hurabiell. Okay, Hurabiell. Oh, okay, that's a good way to remember it. So we are the Black Student Union of City College of San Francisco, and we're advocating for structural change and sustainability within our programs. We cannot be continued to be silenced or pushed to the margins, and we no longer want a conversation, but also action to match the words like students are first that we hear a lot from the administration currently. And that isn't always the case of their actions. So that's why we're meeting with all of the trustee candidates so we can help make this school more reflective of what our needs are, also, especially as Black students. And yeah, so we're very interested in what you have to say. And Great. With that, well, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Trillia Hargrove. I am a BSU member. And then Kier, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Kier Wilson, and I'm the Vice President of the BSU at City College.
Fantastic. Great to meet you both. Yeah.
And if you want to introduce yourself, Marie.
Marie Hurabiell. I am a CCSF board trustee candidate.
Wonderful. And if you want to start off here.
Yeah, we're going to start off. What is something that you believed earlier in your career that you think about differently now?
So I thought about this since you sent it last night. I did ponder it last night. And I think there were a lot of things that I thought differently about when I was younger and kind of new to my career. But one of the things that really jumped out to me as I was kind of pondering this question is when I was younger and starting out my career, I felt like I had to wait my turn, that I had this sort of, and I don't know if I ever actually thought it consciously. It was this unconscious feeling that I had to wait my turn to do things. I had to wait my turn to reach a certain level at my career. And part of that is also this idea that I had to wait until I had the perfect resume to apply for that job, that I had to meet all of the qualifications before I could put my name in, or before I could seek a position that I felt like I was really right for. But then when I looked at the qualifications, I thought, oh, I don't actually, have all of these exact qualifications. So maybe I better, wait until I do. And I definitely think about that differently now. And actually running for this board is a perfect example of that. But I will say, I'm sure you've seen this. And, I'm so happy that I'm talking to two women actually today, because I just feel like women's understanding of themselves and their own roles and abilities. And I never felt like I was a person who felt held back, but I think subconsciously you absorbed these messages in society. And you girls are so lucky because you're young and you're understanding this now at your age. But it was only recently, or in the last 10 years, that I started reading things, that as a gender, we hold ourselves back so much more than any guy would ever do. So, there's a statistic about applying for jobs, and I'm paraphrasing. I'm not going to get the statistic exactly correct, but it's, that women, when a woman applies for a job, she goes through the job posting and, makes sure that she fills every single one of the posting, requirements, and then she'll apply. A man looks at it, he's like, oh, I've got, and she'll apply and she'll still feel like, gosh, I don't know if I'm really qualified for this job. A man will look at it, he'll be like, oh yeah, I meet these two out of totally, he'll get that job, even though there's a much better qualified woman who's kind of holding back. And so I feel like that is one of the things that I have definitely started to think consciously about and recognize in the last few years. And so I definitely think differently about that now. And I have one little example that I just love that actually made me cry as a mom. My 15-year-old daughter loves coding, and she saw that someone had gone to her high school, had started a company, older, but was looking for people at, kind of high school level to work for him over the summer. And she has heard me talk about that statistic. And I did not know this. She didn't tell me she was doing this, but a few months into the summer, she says, Mom, I need my social security number. And I said, why? She said, well, I've been working all summer for this company and they're trying to pay me and they can't pay me because they don't have my social security number. I'm like, what are you talking? Because pandemic, she's been working for them, but from her bedroom. And so I didn't know at all. And she said to him, I said, wow, that's amazing. She's like, yeah, I'm totally unqualified for this job. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, Mommy, I really did not meet the qualifications for this job, but I applied for it because I remember hearing you talk to somebody about this, that, women never apply for things because they don't think they're qualified enough. And she said, I didn't have all the qualifications, but I thought it was at least worth trying. And, I'm so glad I did. And that just like, as a mom and as an older woman talking to two younger women, I'm like, that is what I want to share with you guys, that like, go for it, go for everything, do not ever feel like you're not totally qualified, because I can assure you there's a man who's less qualified than you are who thinks he's totally qualified. So go for it.
Thank you. That was really great. And I want to apologize. I wanted to give you an introduction. If you want to take a little bit of time to do an introduction of yourself, or we could just keep on going into the questions, but just to lay stuff out. And by the way, that was a great answer. Thank you so much.
You're so.
So we have about 10 questions, well, minus one now. And okay. So maybe take about 5 minutes for each one.
Okay.
But if you want to do an introduction, like take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, however you feel. And
sure. Yeah. Sure. My introduction can be pretty simple, I think. I was born and raised in San Francisco. I absolutely love this city. And in parallel, I also am really committed to education. And that's not just something, that I'm telling you because I'm running for this position. It's something that I've actually actively done for the last 22 years. I was on the board of Holy Family Day Home, which is a early childhood learning program in San Francisco on 16th and Dolores. They serve mostly homeless and low-income kids. And I got involved with them when I was in my, mid-20s, because I was invited to come see the program because I had been volunteering for a lot of other things. And I got there and it was my birthday and it was a work day. I was supposed to get to work. I was stopping by for like 10 minutes. I ended up spending 2 hours. I got to work and that was not fun, but I couldn't leave because I was so engaged and impressed and just overwhelmed by the good they were doing, because they were dealing with a lot of kids with a lot of really serious issues. And what I came to believe very strongly is that, and of course, I think we would all believe this if we thought about it, but as a young woman, I hadn't necessarily really thought that much about it. The foundation is so important. If you do not have the foundation, at an early age, you fall farther and farther and farther behind. So that is something I really took as a personal cause and crusade throughout, sort of the rest of my life. I mean, this is something I am very committed to. So I was on that board for 15 years. I actually chaired the Capitol campaign that built there's a new building there that's about 14 years old now. And so I kind of, I've always gone to good schools and things like that, but I have really took on this goal of ensuring that people were able to get a good quality education, that everyone has access to a good quality education. And, so it sort of started there, and I've been involved with tons of other educational institutions since then. I went to Georgetown University. I have been involved with Georgetown for many years in different capacities, as an alum, on the board of governors, on, in various capacities, admissions, interviewing, and things like that. And joined the Board of Regents almost 7 years ago now. We just had our board meetings virtually last week. And being involved at that high level with a world-class institution, there are a lot of things I think I took for granted. And when for me, I came to deciding to run for the CCSF board in a totally sort of backwards way to the way a lot of people come to it. I feel like a lot of people come to it because they view it as a way to get into politics. I'm the total opposite. I came to it because I read the article about the audit, and I'm going to get emotional talking about it right now. I was so angry and personally hurt to read this, and it sat on my chest. It gave me this sickening feeling for weeks. And I thought about it, and I thought, I have to help. I have to do something, because I didn't realize what the problems were when I read it, but I figured that given my background and my experience, I could in some way help. And so I started doing some research and started trying to figure out, how could I help? How could I get involved here? Because one of the things that made me so feel such intense pain about it was that, for example, with Georgetown, I have been able to bring some really exciting, interesting programs and actually one curriculum change to the university. These are things that we're operating, in such an interesting space, and we're getting to do things that are so advanced and so exciting and so, so meaningful. And then I'm reading about an institution that I consider to be a San Francisco gem. This CCSF is an amazing place. The teachers you girls have are incredible. And I would argue that they are frequently better than teachers at private institutions. And don't let anyone hear me say that. Shoot, you're recording this. But the truth is, and I'll explain why. At a lot of other institutions, you have teachers that are wonderful. I'm not putting them down in any way, but they're very focused frequently on their research or their writing. They're focused on maintaining sort of all of these things that you have to do in academia to maintain, certain, credentials and level of engagement. Whereas I think that that a lot of the teachers at CCSF are much more dedicated to the students, much more dedicated, just focusing on the students and focusing on being an excellent teacher, and which is so important. So when I think about, the things I've been able to do at other institutions that allow students to really flourish, and then I read about an institution that I think is so important for such a broad array of people in San Francisco. So, the students who are aiming for their 4-year degree, the vocational training, the students who are coming in mid-career for a career change, all these elements, the older San Franciscans who are coming for more of a community aspect. They want to meet people. They want to, do a fun kind of class like ceramics or, something like that. There are so many people who are served by this institution, and to see that it was completely just in a devastating financial state. And of course, we've learned more from then, right? I mean, the financial state was bad pre-pandemic. Now it's going to be worse. Now you have falling enrollment. What, 24%, I believe, was the last count of drop in enrollment. The operating budget last year was a 26% loss. It's just mind-boggling, and it's just so unfair, because this is an institution that deserves to be world-class. We are in San Francisco, for goodness sake. We have, so much innovation here, so much money here, so many great thinkers here. And so, for me, that's kind of how I came to this. And it took me a while to decide to get into the race, but I finally just decided I have to. And so that's why I'm here. And, we can talk about various, vision and qualifications and things like that. I do want to make sure, I've given a little kind of overview introduction. I definitely want to talk about the Black Student Union and sort of hear from you really what you want to do and how you envision accomplishing the mission and the goals that you have, which I think are fabulous goals. So that's, I guess, my introduction. And here I am. I've got
That's great. Thank you so much.
I do have a law degree. I've got 2 kids. I've got a fiance.
Yeah, that was very comprehensive.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. So we'll be going into question 2 now. Do you have a background in educational equity? And if so, please tell us about it. And about 5 minutes.
Okay, so I think to answer, do I have not a teacher, if that's part of what you're getting at, but I would say that my work with different organizations, for example, Holy Family Day Home, that was very clearly, as I mentioned in my introduction, that is very clearly a population and needs a solid foundation, and working with that population from really what Holy Family Day Home aimed to from about 6 months. So we had a really early childhood education, and then through pre-K, and we did have a small kindergarten program as well. And that was really to ensure each child received a not only a basic foundation, but an accelerated and elevated foundation. And so that, I would say, is like, to me, working with children and helping them, kind of tweak their trajectory so that they're on a really positive, really elevated trajectory from day one, is is about some of the most meaningful work you can do in equity and accessibility. And then, but beyond that, what we started at the Day Home were a lot of programs around parents also, so that parents had access to resume workshops, interview workshops, parenting classes, sort of all of these trainings, so that we were helping to stop the cycle of poverty that a lot. You're dealing with little kids. You can't just have the little kid come have this amazing day at school and then go back into a situation where they might be living in a car, or they might be, living with different relatives, things like that. You really want to help the whole family. So that's some background in that. you know, I've been involved in a lot of different programs that might fall under this category. For example, you know, serving on the board of Hamilton Families, things like that. But what I want to actually address and make sure I have enough time to talk about a little bit is at Georgetown University, we have a program, and that program is sort of designed to have a whole wraparound of students who are frequently first generation students, almost always first in their family to go to college, you know, various different populations that that, you know, you would include in that sort of equity and accessibility bucket. And this program has been around for there were little buckets of it prior to my being on the board, but I actually was one of the sort of early people to really discuss it and really talk about exactly how we would do it, kind of brainstorm on it, and then we really launched it as a full program. And this program brings students together and supports them in such an amazing way. I actually wish we could do it for every student everywhere, because, you know, the statistics on our success are staggering. So the US average four-year institution graduation rate in the United States for everybody, so this is for everybody, is 59%. The average four-year private institution graduation is 62%. So that's unfortunately rather low in the United States. And in our program, in the Community Scholars Program at Georgetown, we have a 91% graduation rate. I mean, we got the formula right. And I would love to be able to roll that formula out to CCSF and, you know, really to every institution in the country, because it's so successful. I mean, you know, we're increasing graduation rates by 30%. That's staggering. It does require a lot of work, but it's totally worth it. And you know, so those are some examples of some of the programs that I've been involved with in this area.
Yeah, thank you, Marie. That was a really good answer.
Yeah.
I didn't know that graduation rates were that low. I knew it was going to be low because I know the United States doesn't take education seriously, but I didn't know it would be that low.
Yeah.
Pretty sad.
Yeah. So what is your strategy to rectify the harm in education in regards to Black students, such as bad policy, underfunded programs, and underrepresentation?
So this is, you know, I actually wrote down some notes that I had in reading your proposal.
Yeah.
Sorry, what was that? Yes, exactly. And so in terms of how I address the clear problems, for me as a, you know, I one of the assets I think I bring to CCSF is that I'm not an insider at CCSF. And I don't know if you've read anything about my campaign, but that is a key tenet, is that good governance requires outsiders. You cannot have, and I say that partly because that's how, you know, corporations work. Like they are required, in order to be listed on the exchanges and everything, to have 50% at least, I think it's actually more than 50%, outside directors, because insiders can tend to forget to see the big picture, right? Which we see happening at CCSF. And so I am running as an outsider. So I cannot speak as an insider about exactly, you know, the levers I would press at CCSF in order to meet the current needs of underrepresented students or Black students or other minority students. But what I can tell you is this. The way I tend to work when I'm on a board or when I'm running something is that I listen first. So I have read, your 2-page asks. I think they make a ton of sense. I would like to see some, at least a preliminary sketched out budget of what we think these things would cost and where we can partner with other parts of CCSF in order to create, synergies and create sort of budget sharing, if you will. I would also want to, and I think I did say this, but I do want to stress it. The first thing I want to do is listen. Because I'm not an insider at CCSF, I want to know what you all think. I want to know what you see as the opportunities, as the challenges, as, in getting from A to B or to Z, what have you already tried? What is working? What isn't working? And then we go from there. And, some of the things like, for example, you have visibility. So, what exactly does success on that metric mean to you? Does it mean more quality visibility? Does it mean more quantity? Does it mean, and in terms of like reaching out to high school students, I think that is a fantastic idea. And I think that's actually something that needs to be done across the board at CCSF is really raising the visibility of this amazing institution among high schools. But particularly, I agree with you, among Black students in high schools. And so, I cannot come in, because I'm not an insider, with a, clear, here's the roadmap. But what I can tell you is that I will bring a lot of creativity to it, and I will listen to you and what your needs are and what you want. And again, I'm not an insider, but I've spoken to a lot of insiders in this journey that I'm on. And one of the things that is clear to me is that it seems that, how do I say this delicately? It seems that issues, questions, concerns have had ideas, have, made asks of the institution, and that frequently nothing happens. That these things come up, people are told, oh, sure, we'll do that, and then they do the opposite, or they just don't seem to listen at all. And I don't know, I think that they printed this. The Chronicle asked a few months ago for just a written response to a couple of questions they had for candidates. And one of the things they mentioned was that it seems that CCSF students feel that the trustees, so this is slightly different from the administration, but that the trustees themselves are not really paying enough attention and don't seem to care about the students. That is unacceptable, 100%. And my answer to that question was broader than this, but one of the comments I made is, this is a no-brainer. Like, office hours, you have to meet with students, you have to meet with people. Being a trustee on a board does not mean you just show up for the board meeting. Being a trustee on a board means you dig in and you understand the students or the population, whatever it is. I mean, I'm on the board of the Presidio Trust. We have a lot of meetings with the public because we need to understand what our constituents want. We can't just sit and decide amongst ourselves what we think should be done. And so, in this context, I would immediately institute office hours. You know, I will be, I mean, if we're still in a pandemic, I will be on Zoom available to anyone who wants to pop in, any student, any teacher, anybody. And I will listen to what anybody has to say. Now, that does not mean that everybody's wacky idea is going to be implemented, but it does mean I will listen and I will talk to you about how we could maybe tweak it to get it implemented, or how, you know, or that, gosh, that seems really expensive and probably not doable in the short run, but perhaps it's something we could put on a back burner for the long run. I mean, there is a way to make sure that you are meeting the needs of the people you are supposed to be serving. And that is something I think has been forgotten. So in my, you know, in my planning, or in my, you know, response to this particular question, I don't have the exact roadmap, but I can tell you we will create it together so that it is what you want and what you need, not what I, from sitting up, you know, in the trustee chair, say is what should be done. And I think, you know, that's also a great thing coming from an outside perspective, because I'm not coming with preconceived notions. You guys can help shape how, you know, how I promote your needs at CCSF. Did that answer your question?
Mostly. You say
Okay.
you don't have a plan, which is understandable. You don't know exactly for a specific group, but to know that you have a broad plan of how you want to help us helps us out a lot.
Yeah.
Great.
And I think that was really interesting, like, because it does seem like the trustees are quite inaccessible at times. Hopefully everybody can hear me because my thing is freezing a little bit. But anyway, it does seem like they're inaccessible, and when you do get access, it's as if they like what you have to say. They'll give you the nice words, but they won't really do anything. They'll just leave you feeling better at the time, but nothing really happens. But even though maybe this could prove to be a little tougher, but you actually giving some input as to what could be changed, or what parts you like about this idea and what parts you don't, will help everybody become more clear about who you are, even if they don't agree, but they'll know how your mind works and they'll know how to proceed from there. And I think that's constructive, and I appreciate that. So thank you for that
Well, my
answer.
goal is absolutely to be collaborative, is to work together, because we all want CCSF to succeed, right?
Right.
And we all want your experience there to be as good as it can be. Absolutely. And just, you know, you reminded me of something when you were commenting on that. Just to give you an example. So on the board of the Presidio, we have board meetings, we have other things. And, you know, just to give you an example, I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but because it's relevant, I show up at a lot of things that no other trustee shows up at. And there are very good trustees on that board. They're very engaged and involved. But I view my role as a trustee as much broader than just showing up at meetings. I view my role as really trying to understand what's going on with all of our employees, what's going on with all of our constituents, which at the Presidio is different than here, but obviously that means all the students, all the faculty. I want to understand what they're going through, what they're experiencing, what all the little facets of life are like, and what different groups feel that they need, or feel that they are being deprived of, or think is going really well. You know, I want to be right there with you on this journey, not just sort of sitting off to the side and making budget decisions. And by the way, that's a big thing that needs to be dealt with. And the fact that we are where we are, I'm like, what are these trustees doing? I don't know. So I did just want to throw that in so that you have some perspective that this is not just something I'm saying. This is something I live in my various roles at different institutions.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate that answer. So I'm going to go into the fourth question. Are you familiar with or aware of the Affirmative Action Task Force and their mission to instate a Black full-time faculty member for the African American Studies Department? And 5 minutes.
So I am aware of it. I don't think I have enough information on it to speak intelligently. So if you want to give me a little, a little flavor and ask what I think, I'm happy to do that. Or if you want to, discuss it with me, however you want to handle that.
Sure. And you could help me here because it's been a while since I've interacted with them. But
we don't necessarily need feedback, but basically what is happening is City College has African American Studies classes, but there are only a few, and we are looking for a department chair. There is a department chair, however, they are not Black, which is not the worst thing, of course, but for African American Studies, you would think a Black person would be running the department. And what we find interesting, we don't want to say it's systemic racism, but it is. You have to have worked a certain amount of years full time to become a department chair. All of the Black teachers who do teach in that department are all hired as part-time employees. So even though they work there 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and you would expect them to be tenured full-time faculty members, full-time administration, nobody is able to take the job. And we have faculty who want the job, who want to be department chair, but they are not given the promotion, they're not given the opportunity because it's written in the books a way to keep them back. So that's all that the Affirmative Task Force is asking for. They sent, we've had meetings over the summer. They sent really mean, big worded letters to people, but it was not approved this semester. They're still trying to work for one person in particular, Dr. Coates. She's really pushing to get the job, and she's been what, Trillia? How long has Dr. Coates been at City? Like 20 years or something like that?
Yeah, I don't know.
But anywho,
she's
wants the job.
Qualified, and she knows students as well. She's definitely there for the community.
Say that again?
I said Dr. Coates knows students as well. Like, she's definitely there for the community. So yeah, and again, this is nothing against the interim chair, but it's definitely worrying. Yeah. And I believe they still frame it like Aaliyah Dunn is still there. Right. As far as I know, who was the last Black chair, but she's not there anymore.
She was the last department chair, but
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she was the last. That was years ago. I don't know exactly how many years ago, but when I went to City College, she had stopped working there already. And I've been in City College over 3 years. So It's been a while. And then that's all. That's what's going on with the Affirmative Task Force and the Black AFAM department chair. But our next question is, have you...
can I comment on that real quick?
Mm-hmm.
So it sort of astounds me that that you're meeting so much resistance on this. I mean, this seems like a really obvious, there are some really obvious fixes here. And so I'm sorry to hear that this has been happening and this has been going on. And I mean, obviously, I guess I'd have to look at what the what the requirements are of the job. But those can be changed, right? I mean, you have to deal with reality. And if the best person for the job doesn't happen to have the full-time label attached to them, or or some other arbitrary label, then we have to figure out how to fix that, because that is not acceptable.
Yeah. But also it's also include, because in the question it says in stating a Black full-time faculty member. So we're trying to also make that process, even if we're going by the books, just put that in place, because they could make all of these excuses if we're trying to make an exception. But the fact that there hasn't been a Black full-time faculty member for so long, then that's concerning.
Do you know why that is?
Well,
yeah, do you know why that is?
I mean, there could be a lot of excuses. You would have to talk to people specifically. Maybe there's different reasons why they didn't think that would be a reason. But regardless, this is a process that we're trying to make happen. And it's faculty members that are really leading the fight, or faculty. Yeah. But it's educators who are leading the fight, and they've been consulting the students, which has been really valuable. And
that's wonderful. Yeah, that sounds like a process that is going in the right direction.
Yeah. So definitely, look them up and everything. Do they have an Instagram? They have a YouTube video that they were talking about some of this stuff. And we can send that to you.
Anyhow, so much.
Yeah. If you want to ask the next question here.
Yeah. Have you taken any classes in African American studies before?
When I was at Georgetown as an undergrad, so that was about 500 years ago, there was a class that I took, but it was a very, this was kind of very early in, and it was more of a, it was a history class, sort of on the history of we covered sort of different histories. And we did cover Africa, which is a huge continent to cover in a really short amount of time. And then of course, in my own studies regarding US history, I mean, obviously I've covered some history there, but definitely not, probably not what you have available to you today. I mean, it definitely was not in my day, which I'm sad was several years ago. It was definitely not as common at all. But I will also say, when I was growing up here in San Francisco, I remember being on a bus one day, taking uni somewhere, and I had my 3 best friends with me, and a man like came over to us. We were kind of in the back of the bus, the 4 of us chatting, and he came over and he had this thick Southern accent, and he said, "Are you guys all friends?" And we're like, obviously, and he went on to talk about how he was from Alabama and he would never have seen the 4 of us together in Alabama. So it was me, my friend Maribel, who was she's Mexican. Her mom actually was from Mexico, so she was first generation. Felicia, who was Black, and then my friend Joanne, who was Korean. So the 4 of us, it never occurred to us that there was anything strange about that, because we grew up in San Francisco, and back then, at least, I mean, I feel like things have become a little notice color, race, we were just friends. And so I just throw that out because, there's a lot of history that we need to learn, and a lot of history that we need to acknowledge and be mindful of. But growing up in San Francisco back then, it wasn't even, there weren't these divides back then. At least in San Francisco, it really didn't feel like it. And when I got to Georgetown was actually the first time one of my best friends, his name was Eddie, and he was Black. And the second day of school, I went to sit with him, and he was like, "You really shouldn't sit here. I'll see you later." And it was all Black. And of course, the basketball players were there. I was like, "But wait a second, why can't I sit with you guys?" All of our best players, Alonzo Mourning was in my class. That really dates me. You guys probably haven't even heard of him. But yeah, oh gosh, that's really awful. Oh, I'm gonna go cry now. No, he, and he was saying this to me, and I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm gonna sit here. What do you mean?" And he's like, "Don't you understand? Like, white people sit over there, and we're sitting over here at our own table." And I was like, "I don't understand why." So, I think everybody has these really different experiences. My experience was never one of seeing, my best friend Felicia was at our house all the time, spending the night all the time. And, I was at her house all the time, and we just never really thought about it. And I wish the whole world was like that. I wish we all never thought about our differences, but since we do, we definitely need to honor and elevate, everyone, and especially the Black experience, which has been so difficult. And I wonder if I should share this now, or if there was another question that's relevant. But I will tell you, we've had a really interesting experience at Georgetown, because Georgetown, the Jesuits, it's a Jesuit school. The Jesuits are 100% opposed, were 100% opposed to slavery. And so the Jesuits came out very strongly way back in the day. Well, there was one priest at Georgetown who brought in some slaves, and Jesuits keep insane records, and they keep them around forever. So there are records of the slaves. So we had this, I was privileged to be on the board while this discussion came up. When this discussion came up 5 years ago, yeah, it was around 5 years ago, five or 6 years ago. So Georgetown was on the cutting edge of this, by the way. So 5 or 6 years ago, it came to light. Somebody found some records and realized that Georgetown had some slaves, not a whole lot, but had some slaves. And everyone was traumatized by this and horrified by this. And so what we did, and I can't take credit for this, this was somebody else's idea, but there was a task force and a lot of discussion, a lot of board discussions, a lot of committee discussions around how do we handle this really ugly piece of our history. And here's how we decided to handle it. And I personally am pretty proud of this. I don't know what you'll think of it, but they tracked down every descendant of every slave and actually met with all of them and created a legacy program. So for example, I went to Georgetown, so my daughter has, the legacy status. That doesn't mean she gets in, but it means she has a better chance of getting a legacy, so that for purposes of applying to Georgetown, they are part of the Georgetown family. And so I thought that was a really good way to handle it personally. There's so many so many blights on our history, but this was one that we could actually directly address, and you know, and I think it really is a positive thing. And we also actually changed the name of some of our buildings too, which yeah, so that was I just wanted to get to mention that.
You changed the names of some of the buildings to the slave names?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Once we identified people who had done things that we felt were repugnant, we took their names off and put slave names on. Yeah, I mean, it's been reported, like I think in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, interested, but I actually have a book that we published at the time too, if you ever want to take a look at that. It's really kind of details all of the work that went into that.
Cool. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. Well, I don't really have any responses, but I'm just going to go into the next question. That's number 6. Can you identify funds in the school budget meant for Black students? If so, please tell us the type of fund and how to access it. So this could be allocations of funds that are specific for Black students. And this could be in the budget, or this could even be like a scholarship that you know about and maybe other people don't know about and you'd like to share it. Yeah, because we share the knowledge.
And these are things that are at CCSF right now, you're asking?
Yes.
If I've identified
Yes.
those?
Yeah.
No, I can't.
Allocations or scholarships or something.
Okay. I cannot say that I have identified something in the CCSF budget right now that would be usable for that. But what I can say is the CCSF budget has to be entirely redone. It is obviously pretty disastrous right now. So in combing through and pulling it apart as it currently exists, you know, that would be absolutely one thing I would have my eye on, is coming up with funding. And are you talking about funding for students specifically, or for this programming that you want to do, like for the union?
Well, the thing is that like our programs, they do revolve around students, so it could be very intersect a lot. But if you can think of things that are for students specifically, that's pretty much what we're going for.
Yeah. So
also the other one as well.
Yeah, and one thing, you know, as I was making my little notes for our conversation, I mean, one thing that I want to do is, you know, in especially in looking at the asks that you had, the mission and the goals and the asks, is, you know, I think we want to be creative, and I think there is so much possibility out there to be creative, and be creative in partnership. I don't want this to be, you know, the board's going to go off and fundraise, or the students are going to go off and fundraise. I think it should be, hey, let's work together and let's figure out, you know, let's brainstorm what are the best ideas, and even what are some not so great ideas, because you never know what is going to hit. And this is another like part of this conversation, but also as a teeny bit of a side note, you know, just since I'm talking to young women and I want to, you know, elevate you as much as possible, never take no for an answer unless you actually hear it. So meaning there could be some crazy ideas like, hey, let's go ask Salesforce for some money, or let's go ask whatever. Don't ever say, they'll never give us money. Let them say that. Like, don't ever take no for an answer unless they actually say it to you. And even then I would go back again. But, you know, what I want to say about the options here, I mean, there are so many amazing businesses in the Bay Area that could be partners with CCSF in so many ways, not just with the Black Student Union, but just in so many ways. And so if we start really mining those potential relationships, we can focus in on which ones would be really resonate with the Black student experience, and how can we bring them in to help elevate this program and to help meet these needs, because your asks are completely sensical, valid. They are great ideas. So we can find people or organizations that could potentially support that. Another thing that I don't see has been done, but again, I don't have full visibility into the organization yet, but there are, alums at every school that give money to those schools. So, really making a conscious effort to mine the alumni. And I know there are some phenomenal alumni of CCSF. So why aren't we, why haven't the trustees in the past worked with those alums to really bring in their investment of resources, whether it's time, dollars, a combination, their potentially jobs that they might have to offer, things like that. Like, you probably read this in my bio, but I've raised over $40 million. It's actually close to 45 million now in the last 20 years for educational, cultural, medical, a variety of causes. Raising money is what I do best, really. So the idea of, raising money and balancing a budget, by the way, which, again, that has to be addressed first. but there are options that I think creativity has not been brought to bear. I feel like, and I think probably all of the trustees are lovely people who want to do good for the school, but I don't think people have viewed it very much as as a passion. They're sort of showing up at meetings and stumbling around a budget and whatever. And when you want to make real change and you want to advance, tremendously, you need to do other things. You cannot just sit by and review the budget. You have to take action. You have to really be invested. And so those concepts for me are ways that that while there may not be a pile of money sitting around at CCSF to meet these needs, there is money out there. There is money that we can access as we partner together. And you guys are darling and awesome. And I would want to see you right on the front of that charge, going in there and asking for the money, because you'll get it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of money, this is a two-part question. Do you know how much money is in the budget reserves? And if you had control of the budget, how would you use money to support Black students?
So I read the audit, and I'm not recalling off the top of my head how much is in the reserves, but I know it's not what it should be. I know it's low. And I was, I'll be honest, my fiance was looking at the budget at the audit with me. I made him sit down with me and spend time with it. And his response was, oh my gosh, what are you getting yourself into? This is really, 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 really going to be tough to fix it. But, I'm up for the challenge. So no, there is not enough money there for anything right now. So I think one thing that has to be done is we have to pull back and determine what makes sense, what doesn't, and let's have an eye to the goals that each unit wants to accomplish. And when I say unit, I don't just mean like department. I also mean all of the various stakeholders of the school. So all of the students, the different student affinity groups, the the teachers, the faculty, the staff, the administration, and then how are we prioritizing? And my goal is to prioritize the students. And that means taking stock of all of the student needs and then figuring out exactly how you layer those so that, sort of basic student needs are met. And then, beyond that, where do we allocate precious resources so that, for example, Black student needs are met? Because obviously, everybody has a right to a good, solid education, and especially in this city, especially at CCSF. And so if that means people are not getting what they need because of a particular deficiency in the way that that it's been funded in the past, for example, what you're talking about with the not having an African-American chair of the department, then hey, what are all of the tweaks that need to be made that will get people further on their path? So it's not necessarily just saying we need to throw money at different things. It's also saying, what are the other factors here that will help advance these causes? So for example, it's not going to cost more to have an African-American head of that department. That's a fix that is not necessarily requiring an input of money. So there are so many of those things, right? Where if you start systematically going through and addressing, here's the bucket of student needs, here's the bucket of teacher needs, here's the bucket of administration needs. And first of all, prioritizing the students, because they are number one. That is the raison d'etre. That's why everyone's there. And then I just thought of something I wanted to add to that. With the budget. So, going back to the comments I made about being independent and not, so, I did not seek the endorsement, when all these different endorsing bodies send you their emails and ask you to participate and fill out a questionnaire. I did not participate in anything connected to CCSF, and I asked every other organization that sent something, are you in any way affiliated with CCSF? Because I'm not participating in anything that has to do with CCSF. That makes it harder to get elected, by the way, because the stakeholders really push their people. But let's be really clear. The reason CCSF is in such dire financial situation is partly because of that, and large part because of that. The stakeholders push their people get in, and then the stakeholders demand, I don't know, for example, a 10% administration raise when the budget is at a 26% loss. I mean, come on, like it's so clearly corrupt doing that. And that is why I say there's going to be a bunch of stakeholders. We need to take the stakeholder needs into account. And I'm one of the only people who can do that in a fair way. I'm one of the only people who can say, we need to put the students first, because I didn't get elected by the other stakeholders, right? So you need people, and this is what is sort of systematically wrong with CCSF and the trustee population at the moment, is that they were all elected by certain stakeholders. And so, maybe you cut classes and give the administration a raise. Does that seem right to do for the students? I don't think so, but so why would you do that? So, I just wanted to make sure to throw that in, that well, the budget may be a disaster and the reserves are clearly not what they should be. When you step back and you put the right priorities in place, it will be hard. There will be cuts required everywhere, probably. I mean, just looking at how bad the budget is. But you know, when you have your priorities straight, you will do everything you can to ensure that if you can't meet a certain need immediately, that you have got a plan in place to meet that need. And that is what I will absolutely promise you.
Thank you for that answer. Actually, the next question, it does go into those student needs. Well, it was the Black student needs, and thank you for looking at it. I'm just going to pull the Black student union demands real quick, but the question is, what is your strategy in regards to those demands? And I will read it out. Oh, what am I doing? Let me share the screen. That's what I'm trying to do. So we have the Black Student Union demands for CCSF, and I will read them out.
Okay.
So, all right. We ask that CCSF understands our goals are to have a unified Black space and presence that connects all of the resource centers, AFAM studies departments, and Black Student Union, to networking with high schools so we can promote ourselves to potential CCSF students. This encourages longevity and circulation into the BSU so we can continue its legacy. 3, making sure that Black programs and resources are given the proper visibility by CCSF. And 4, advocating for adequate funding for the African American Resource Center. And the last one, an AFAM Studies Associates of Arts degree that can be used for transferring, which we currently do not have. As you can see, and I'll bring them if you want me to read them again.
Do you mind going back to
Sure.
that slide just so it's up?
Sure. Just to let you know,
thank you.
We noticed.
And then did you have the?
Oh, sorry. We noticed this before, like when we have the slide up, they can't see our faces. They only see this. But if you want to just address it and leave this up, or I can just read it to you and you can just ask me, whichever one. Would you rather?
You're saying that the video. Oh, okay.
Yes, for the recording. It only shows the screen share, which is weird.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. You can take it down then.
Okay. But I'll definitely repeat myself if you want. So
great. Yeah. And so what was the question?
Okay, so the first one was to have a unified Black space and presence that connects all of the resource centers, AFAM Studies Department, and Black Student Union. Oh, did you hear me?
Yeah. The question was, what is your strategy in regards to the Black Student Union demands?
Okay, great.
Sorry.
So my strategy is multifold. So first I would want to chat with you, which I actually thought we would. I didn't realize you had 10 questions for me. I thought this was going to be a more like workshop where we were going to come up with some ideas to advance all of this stuff, actually. So if this isn't that, which it obviously isn't, my next step, I guess once on the board would be to pull everyone together, to pull your team together, to pull anyone from the Black Student Union who wants to come on board. And, first of all, just have a really open, honest conversation. Like, what has your experience been as a Black student at CCSF? Like, tell me all about that. Tell me, what you feel has gone well and what you feel is really lacking, what you feel is problematic. If there's anything that is like high alert alarming, like I want to know that. Actually, I want to know that right now. If there is anything that's high alert alarming, you want to, and then we'll address these things as, in order of importance to you, obviously. And then, I'd want to also understand like what got you to these 3, I guess 4 goals, what was it? What was the process that got you to these? Because I actually think these are really, really impressive goals. I think they make sense. I think they're completely doable. And I mean, there's going to be some cost there, and that brings me to my next part in the planning process is we need to cost everything out, right? We need to know what funds are going to be required to accomplish the goals. And by the way, the goals might shift a little bit as we have meetings with everyone, with all of your team, and kind of thinking through questions, issues, what is really important. And I, for example, when you talk about in the document that you sent, sort of the community workers, the wraparound services, I mean, I think you've touched on something really important there, because I do believe given my experiences at Georgetown in that program I was talking about, it is really important to have those services, whether they be, some counseling in different tracks, right? Counseling, like the mental health counseling, career counseling, the various, and even just, hey, I'm having a bad day, like, let's talk. And then also there's, what I have seen effective at Georgetown as well is peer counseling. So, there are groups that get together every week at Georgetown and have these conversations where they can just be free and they can just share and they can just ask for help. And, so having things like that as well, which, you may already have in mind, but that's just another thing I would want to recommend. And I didn't mention this before, but just in terms of the mental health services, the company that my fiance and I run is actually a mental health technology company. So possibly even bringing in some, kind of state-of-the-art opportunities to CCSF to use tools at private companies. I mean, that would be part of my goal in general for CCSF, is starting to bring more, tech companies in where we can really avail ourselves of their resources. And it's a two-way street, right? They bring some resources to the table, whether it's technology or teachers or they receive back, hopefully, wonderfully well-trained students who then want to, potentially work for them later. So there can be a real symbiotic relationship there. It doesn't have to be a one-way street. And specifically with regard to the Black Student Union, I mean, I would want to go out and talk to companies about, hey, do you want to sponsor this? Do you want your name on this, on this amazing program? Do you want to provide the, the technology resources at the center? How great would that be to have your name attached to that? I mean, there's so much potential here. So, first of all, getting all the interested parties in the room to just have a big conversation, possibly over a few conversations, putting together the budget, and then, setting goals for fundraising and working together on that, partnering on that. I mean, asking for money is an incredible skill to have. And so, one of the awesome things that could come out of this is that, we work together, and a group of trustees and a group of students are working together to go make asks and to talk to people. And that is a tremendous skill to have, and it would be really fun, for someone like me who's an expert at fundraising, to be able to, work with you guys who are young in your careers and in your, in your lives, to gain those skills. It's really critical, and it's something that, as I'm talking, I'm realizing, there needs to be more modeling of this for young people, but also specifically for Black people and for other people of color. Like, you know, I mean, I am out there doing this, and, you know, it's something you know, thinking about as we're talking in terms of how much fun I would have mentoring you lovely ladies in doing something like that. And there probably hasn't been a lot of mentoring around that whole idea of going out and, you know, fundraising, and how do you ask people for money and how do you talk about that? And I mean, obviously you're very articulate and you did a wonderful job in creating this document. But then, you know, it's how do you go out into the real world and actually sit at a table with someone and say, and we'd really love for you to hand over, you know, $10,000. So that would be a lot of fun, you know, and those are skills that, you know, you will be so far ahead of the game of all of your peers, you know, of any color, black, white, you know, to have that skill, to have that ability, you know, coming out of your schooling with that ability would be tremendous. So those are kind of my thoughts going into that.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? Everyone, including yourself, all of your opponents, when we've sent the demands and talked to them in the meeting, literally everyone has said, I can't believe you guys don't have these things. These are easy things that you should have. I don't understand why you even have to ask for these things. These are not crazy demands. So thank you for that answer. You've answered this mostly throughout the interview, but what makes you different in this race?
So I won't belabor it because I know we're already over time, but I will just quickly hit, I'm independent. I'm really the only truly independent person in the race, which I think gives me a huge advantage in terms of actually being able to make a difference at CCSF and fix the problems. I have tons of experience, by far the most experienced person in this race. And there are other people I think are wonderful, but there's no one who has the breadth or depth or length of experience that I have in overseeing complex organizations. So, and by the way, I have sat on and chaired many finance and audit committees. I currently sit as the chair of the Presidio Finance and Audit Committee. So I know how an audit is supposed to look. I know how different this audit is. And I actually have plans and processes to deal with, you know, audit issues as they arise, which I do not see happening at CCSF right now. I don't see a process there. So, you know, I'm sure people are working hard and doing their best, but if you don't have any experience with this, it's hard, you know, to figure out what to do. So that I think is a tremendous advantage. You know, so many of the things that we've discussed, just having, you know, a ton of experience in education. You know, I am an entrepreneur, I'm scrappy, a ton of experience in fundraising. You know, so, and I, you know, this is kind of a side note, but I love people. So like getting together with all of you and, you know, helping elevate everything that you want to do, and just, you know, having that opportunity to meet and connect as human beings. I just love that. So, I'm forgetting all of my things that I would want to say normally because, you know, I've kind of woven a lot of them in, but I would say those are probably the really important things that, you know, I'm going to be able to, and here's the thing, I'm willing to be the bad guy. Like, I think, unfortunately, the trustees are so beholden to the people that got them elected that it's really hard for them to take a stand. But if you have someone independent in the room, that person can say, look, it doesn't make sense to give a 10% raise to the administration when you're in a 26% operating loss, you know, and fine, I'll be the one to say I was the bad guy. I'm the one who put a stop to that. You know, I think for the other trustees, it would actually be helpful to have a scapegoat on the board, and that can be me. I'm okay with that. I don't need to be loved by everybody. I just have to do the right thing for CCSF and for the students.
Wow, that was a great answer. So this might be something that you've already woven in, as you said already, but the last question is, how are you committed to helping the African American Studies Department? And yeah. Were you able to hear me? Did I cut out? Oh, did my mic cut out? Kier,
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you cut out.
Okay. So the last question is, how are you committed to helping the African American Studies Department? And if I cut out again, can you do it, Kier?
Yeah. How are you committed to helping the African American Studies Department?
Yeah, I think we've talked about a lot of this already to support and advance. I do agree with your desire that if the students in the program and the students, the Black students want a Black head of that department, it doesn't make any sense to keep setting up artificial barriers to that. So, all the things that we've discussed, I think we've kind of woven it all through, but absolutely supportive of ensuring that you have the best role models, the best leadership, the best opportunity to really fulfill all of your goals and all of your potential.
Yeah, and after this meeting, I'm gonna look for all the stuff with ATF 21 just to show you like what has been happening throughout the past. I want to say, as far as I know, they've barely been pushing it over a year, like all the documentation of who they've spoken to, who's involved. I'd love to send that so they can see it.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Please.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You mean
the interview.
AF 21, but yes. Yes, thank you,
Well,
Kier. That would be great.
ATF 21.
Huh? Oh, my thing is going out. Dang it.
Oh,
all right.
you
Well,
got
anyway, this was wonderful. I'm sorry about my internet now.
That's okay.
But
it happens to me all the time.
Yeah. This has become something that I'm jaded against in the era of Zoom. But
yes,
this was wonderful. Thank you so much for meeting with us. I know it's like really getting into election season, but thank you for taking this time, putting yourself out there. And yeah, was there anything you wanted to comment, Kier, or yourself, Marie?
I just want to say thank you so much. This was so fun, so informative. You ladies are phenomenal, and I really hope that we get to work together, going forward with getting this Black Student Union off the ground, and also, figuring out the budget and just, creating the best possible experience for you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Marie.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
You have a great rest of your day.
Thank you too. Have a great night. Bye-bye.
Bye.